Hi everyone, I'm your host Emma Burgic.
And I'm your co-host, Jose Camacho.
Whether you're a player or a coach,
or you're just passionate about what you do and you want to be the best at it,
this is the EMAzing podcast for you. Today's episode is sponsored by MatchSet. MatchSet is an amazing company that provides players with incredible equipment and apparel. With MatchSet, equipment does matter, and they make sure it won't slow you down.
Use code Tennis with Emma to get 10% of Match Tennis today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the EMAzing Tennis podcast. It's a new and first-time setup that Emma's not going to be here. She got COVID-19. Doesn't feel too well. She's such a grinder. Like today, this morning, she goes like, "No, I feel terrible. I'm not doing it." And then she goes, "No, never mind. I'm jumping in there." Like she just fights, But she doesn't feel too well. So it's only me and our amazing guest, Terhemba, which is. You're a legend, man. You're a legend. It's the first thing that when Emma introduced me to you, the first thing that she said was, "He's the guy that everybody knows." And I remember when I said I just didn't know you because I'm new to tennis and everything. Everybody was like they wanted to I said something horrible, So I mean, your resume speaks for itself. You probably one of the most experienced guys out there. You just know what you're talking about. You're in the high performance level stuff, but. Just everybody, you're such a nice guy, but everybody knows you either for the nice person you are, but also for your amazing career. So why don't you tell us a little bit to begin with about your career and what are you at now?
Okay, thanks for that lovely intro. So I was born and raised in Nigeria, and I moved to the U.S. Actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I started playing tennis at 6. Was one of the highly ranked juniors in Africa, basically in the 14s and 16s. Played tennis all the way through to my 17th birthday. Then I quit, got into basketball. And then I ended up coming over here for tennis on a scholarship to Florida A&M. Redshirted my freshman year, left after that to go play professionally, got injured, ended up at Everet Tennis Academy where I started coaching really young. I believe I was 21 at the time, and basically led me to where I am right now. I am currently the director of tennis performance at One Tennis Academy in Boca Raton, Florida. Built that 3 years now. I think 3.5 years. We'll be going on our 4th year so far. So yeah, that's currently where I'm at now.
That's awesome. And yeah, going back to, because I remember I knew one of your coaches, right? And I knew the academy.
Right.
But then I feel like it's such a small world between coaching. It feels like it's huge and there's a lot of people out there, but there's always connections. You know what I mean?
There's
you meet someone that knows someone and it all centers back to Terhemba. So it always ends up, everybody knows you, man. So that's fantastic. And so One is a really, really good, prestigious, high performance academy, right? So it seems like all the players you guys have don't play for recreational tennis, but it's focused for players that are trying to go college or pro. Am I right?
Right, correct. We part of the culture and the philosophy that I wanted to start when I got into that was, I think high performance tennis has a lot to teach everyone, whether it's someone who is just playing just to stay healthy, not get fat, so to speak. You have players who come in there, they don't even know what their expectations are of themselves, whether it's college or the pros, But one thing that we wanted to embrace together collectively as a unit was just the culture. So people come in, they pay for a service, you give them the best of what you have when it comes to that. And then the ones who don't know can decide for themselves. For example, you have kids who are super fit, very focused, ability to problem solve is there and all of that, but their understanding of what it means to go pro is very flawed. So they'll come in there and they'll go through the work and then you see the improvement and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, how much further out am I if I wanted to go pro? And you're like, well, you're not very far off. And then all of a sudden it's like, aha, this is a aha moment thing.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest thing about us at One was, it's just the culture that we set. Everybody gets held accountable for how their day goes, whether you're 12 or you're 25, and we sort of help guide them through that stuff, not through personal opinion, but based on your ability to do the work.
Right.
So I would say that's been the biggest thing that's kind of helped propel us to where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I planned this podcast to just focus on, like, we try to focus on a certain amount, like a certain audience in the tennis world, right? And I feel like we haven't gone into, because there's not a lot of, like, I feel like there's a minority that high performance players, right? There's more club players, just for like kids that go to summer camps. Like, it's more, there's more fun tennis than competitive pro college level, right?
That's correct.
So I think, but EMA, I think, has a big following in terms of like players that are trying to go pro or play college or play like a high level juniors. So we wanted to do the podcast, like, what better person to do with someone that's so involved and knows so much about that world. So the first question that I wanted to go into is, what is, like, for kids that are listening to that are still haven't gone to the age that they're maybe thinking about going to an academy, right? Or they're before that step, and they want to know how the life is for a full-time academy student. How does a week look like for one of your guys?
So typically a week would be, you have 2 hours of tennis in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. So that's 4 hours of tennis and an hour of fitness in between. So typically we have two versions of student athletes there, the ones who do online high school or online schooling, so to speak, and the ones who go to regular school. So the kids who do online school, they, like everyone else, they do the 2 hours in the morning, 7:45 to 9:45. Then they have fitness at 10. Between 11, when they're done with fitness, and 3, they have lunch and they do their schoolwork. And then we're back on at 3 o'clock to 5 p.m. in the afternoon. So that's basically, scheduling-wise, what the week looks like. On the weekends, it usually is when they play tournaments, or depending on where we are in the schedule, they have a rest recovery week. Most of our kids do compete on the weekends, whether it's the Battle of Bocas, USTA level 4s, 3s, 1s, what the case may be, or quite a few of our kids play the ITF International Junior schedule. So that means they hop on a plane, travel somewhere for sometimes 2 weeks in a row, 1 week, 3 weeks, depending on the scheduling. So that's pretty much the week outlook, so to speak. With the pros, we have a couple of WTA, ATP pros who are based out of there. Their schedule is a little bit different. Most of them come in at 10 during the regular schedule. And then depending on where they are in the tournament schedule during the course of the year, they're either doing 1 practice a day or 2 practices a day. Okay. Typically, when we're when we're midway into the season, they usually do 1 solid practice during the day, and then fitness, and then rest and recovery. Right. Just because there's only so many hours in the day, and when you're playing high-level tournament matches, so to speak, body needs a little bit more time. So that's what their day looks like. Right,
that's great. And do they, like, this is what my next question was, for competitions, do they individually compete, or do they have, do they travel as a team for certain tournaments? Do the coaches go with them, or the competition is more individual?
Right. For the most part, they travel as a team. Not necessarily the pros, but like the junior ITF players, for example, or the kids competing in nationals. Like we're fortunate enough to have a group of kids that are about the same level with each other. So we have a group of kids who went to 12 nationals in girls clay courts. Right. So they go as a team. We send a coach. We had a couple of players who went to girls 18s hardcourt. We send a coach there. The ITF trips, depending on where they're ranked. For example, if you have we have a kid who's ranked 300 ITF boys, so he'll be playing grade 3s, grade 2s, grade 1s. Maybe the next person closest to him is like maybe 600, 700. They'll be playing more J60s, or formerly J4s. Yeah. So in that case, you have a split situation where either one coach goes here and one coach goes there, or we prioritize helping the ones who are still coming up So yeah, sometimes you do have that problem, but for the most part, they tend to travel as a unit, as a team.
So you try to like make teams regarding the level, and then set them up with competition. We do the schedule
based on how many kids do we have in this ranking range, so they go to play the same tournament. Because ultimately, it ends up being cost effective for them too. It's cheaper for us to send a coach with 4 players, 3 players or more. They split the expenses of a coach, so they have someone who's over there overseeing the tournament matches, their prep, and just making sure that they're well looked after and everything. So this way, the parents don't have to take time off work to do that.
Right, I see. That's great. And then, well, you kind of answered this, but in terms of academics, so you said there you have students. Is that just choice, the guys that take online and the guys that go to school physically, or is it by level?
It's you know, a lot of it has to do with some kids prioritizing future academics. So they, for lack of a better explanation, a lot of kids don't believe they have what it takes early on to go pro.
To go pro, right.
Or for example, they'll pick a school like Harvard over a school like UCLA or University of North Carolina, where the tennis is typically more competitive. So they'll focus more on the academics now. Obviously, you're going to Pinecrest, St. Andrews, American Heritage schools like those. And that's where you have the sort of differences, because some schools won't allow you the freedom to go away for a week to go play an ITF schedule. So all you're left with is Battle of Boca and USTA tournaments on the weekend. But academics it's very, very important for us, because the thing about going to school and doing well at school is it's pretty much the only way we know we can trust you to do what you're supposed to do. You know, that's how we find out what your responsible level is like. You know, other than doing the work on the court, of course, but you know, we're trying to teach them life through tennis. So the tennis and being an elite athlete is one thing, but also being elite at life, and that's taking care of your academics. So we usually recommend early on that if the kid has the athletic gift and the talent, that they at least try online school in the early stages, early years, because you can always go back to regular school when you're 16 if you've spent the required amount of time training to get to at least the level where now you're getting looked at by certain elite colleges and stuff. And you know, for the most part, we have a lot of parents that trust us in that regard. So yeah.
That's great. So it basically comes down to priorities of the kids and what they want to do in their future for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. And then this is more for like the coach director, especially you that they're director. When and how do you start seeing like kids that are going towards a college route, kids that can actually go pro? Is this like a talk that you at some point have, like at a certain age you were like, okay, buddy, like even if this are your goals, like for your own well-being, for the finances of your parents, like this is not an option. Do they figure it out themselves, and do their trainings at some point differ, you know, from the college players and the ones that actually want to go pro?
Well, you know, so, you know, a long time ago, I was fortunate enough to be mentored by one of the greatest coaches, I guess, in the world, Andy Brandy. You know, he was a former head coach at University of Florida, one of the winningest college coaches in history. And he told me this. He goes, you know, you won't know if you have a thoroughbred or a fancy horse until you put both of them through the ringer and have them do the work. So for us, it's we tend to treat everyone the same. Like people ask me, you know, do you have a program for kids not going pro? I go, I don't know what that means, because you know, the only way we'll find out if you put the same work for you, we put you through the same degree of work as everybody else, and it varies from kid to kid, you know, from player to player. Like some players develop really late, you know, athletically speaking. Some kids, you see them at 13 years old, and athletically they're just freaks. You know, I'll give you a good example. Like I had the fortunate experience of working with Madison Keys starting when she was 8-9 years old. And you can tell there was nothing special about her. She couldn't put two balls on the court. but she loved being on the court
Right.
and she loved competing. Both her parents were athletically, talented. She had the genes, so you could see physically she was just different.
Right.
And that's the thing. But ultimately, you have to remember what your role is as a coach,
Yeah.
but also as a teacher.
Right.
Because it's up to you to figure out what this kid has
Right.
or doesn't have. Some kids you wouldn't even find out until their last year in the junior, 17, 18. The light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden you just see something that you haven't seen yet.
Right.
And that's where, just having faith in the work that you're doing and not necessarily quitting or moving on just because this person hasn't done this at a certain age that
Right.
stereotypically people think you're supposed to be doing things.
Right.
And, that's part of the fun job about the sport.
Yeah.
At least for me as a coach. So it varies from kid to kid.
Right.
There's no set age or goal. You put them through the work, and some people take some time. Some people bubble
Right away.
Right away.
Yeah, it's an interesting trait because it seems to be like a common trait of like successful athletes and programs.
Right.
How process oriented they are.
Right.
How the outcome is always an outcome. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's at the end, but it's never. The focus is never there. Right.
Right.
It always seems like successful people have a more process, like you said, like kids like Madison Keys that enjoy every single day.
Right.
And then at some point it pops up and it's even more special because you weren't really playing for that, right?
Yes.
You were playing for every day and being the best version as you guys do
Right.
in one. And then things just kind of happen,
Right.
or maybe they don't. Maybe a new path opens, right?
Right.
And it's really interesting what you said about like late bloomers because I remember one time talking with Emma and she was talking about, I think it was Sabalenka. Mm-hmm. I think she knew her from a young age. I'm pretty sure she grew with some of these players, and how she told me a lot of these like really, really top athletes, like top 10 in the world in WTA, they really weren't succeeding that much as a young age. No. But it's because they had a team that was so focused on the future. That they were their training was, I don't know, like I should give you this example of how she would hit through every single ball and be so aggressive, and it wasn't working for her because she was playing pushers that would get every single ball back, right? Every single ball. and I feel like you still see it in Battle of Boca.
Oh yeah.
These like kids that just grind and all, like, I don't want to call you old, Emma, but like older girls on the older side, they struggle, right? Because these girls just keep making the ball. And then these girls that weren't winning tournaments, right? Because they're playing so aggressive, they were being trained for a future of, and now that they're blooming, right?
That's
and
correct.
so I don't know. I think that's really, really interesting, and it must require a lot of courage to be like, this is gonna work at some point. It must be so frustrating because I'm not gonna win right now.
Right.
But it's at some point it's gonna. Yeah.
And it's very easy to tell when you go out there and you watch like a competitive match at any tournament. You can tell the ones who are playing because they just want to win, but they don't understand what winning means.
Right.
I need to just win this match because if I win, maybe Nike will give me free stuff or Wilson will give me free rackets.
Right.
You have those who are winning to get the attention of somebody else. So it's not even about them now.
Right.
If I win, maybe Duke will come in. Maybe I'll get into Duke or Stanford or whatnot.
Right.
And then you have those who are being coached to win so that the coach looks good.
Yeah.
If my players are winning, I'll get more clients.
Makes sense.
More clients mean more money.
Yeah.
So do whatever it takes for you to win that match, because it becomes more about me, less about them. And it's heartbreaking because, ultimately you go through that period where, okay, you're frustrating to play, but you're winning a lot of matches, and then you get to the point where you just can't win a single match to save your life.
Yeah.
And it happens quite a lot,
That's really interesting, actually. I've never thought about that, like coaching, like you kind of selfishness, right? And you're like, I'm here for the money or for building a reputation, and then
it happens a lot, all the way through the pro level.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm gonna get off the question schedule real quick because I feel like I do that every single podcast. Like I plan a whole thing and then I end up just talking about random stuff. But I recently found out, I don't know like if this is gonna be controversial, but that Rick Macy charges $800 an hour, which seems outrageous to me. Like outrageous. I want to see your thoughts on this. Because I have a really polemic stance on this.
I've spoken about this in general, not on the platform, and it's, Rick Macy has done quite a bit for the game of tennis.
Right.
But it's my problem isn't so much about what he charges for his lesson. I mean, I think that's an insane amount, but especially for the body of work that he does, you know, it's like nobody pays nobody spends $1 million on a camel. Okay, you spend $1 million on a horse,
right?
Because when that horse is done racing, I can use it to transport something, and it will get there within a certain reasonable amount of time, right? A camel is always going to be a camel. And unfortunately, with a lot of people, is that price point is not based on what he's doing now.
Right.
It's based on what he is still marketing himself as, that he did 30 years ago. Right. You know, and that's the issue I have with it. Like, if you go on a court with a 12-year-old kid, or you go on the court with an 8-year-old kid, or you go on the court with a 16-year-old kid who's playing competitively at tournaments, you can't coach all three of them the same way. And basically, I've been there and I've seen some of his lessons, obviously doing the Ballot Boca. The basket is always full, and it's feed, because, I mean, okay, he's a little bit older now, close to 80, and he can hit. He's not like a guy like me, sure, and I get that, but you can easily have somebody on the court hitting while you're observing. But no, it's, you do an hour lesson, and it's a lot of fed balls. When I say a lot, it's more 20 to 25 minutes of you actually doing something. Right. There's at least another 20 minutes of talking, and then maybe 10 minutes of picking up balls. So it's an hour lesson that's really like 20 minutes. So you're paying $800 an hour for a 20-minute lesson, essentially. Yeah. And the crazy thing about it is people still buy into it. But when you go over there, the program is basically a bunch of 8 to 10-year-old kids. Right. There's not one single high-performance player that's training over there. Right. Do you understand? So, you know, there's pro coaches who are making north of $200K a year, plus bonuses included. So you can end up being I know guys who are making $350 a year. Right. You know, but that's you're working with a pro who's making maybe north of $1 million, $2 million a year just in prize money. You know, plus endorsements and all of that. But you have a situation where a guy, and that's the crazy thing about me. What are you doing with an 8-year-old kid that you're charging $800 an hour? Yeah, you understand? Like it's as a private coach, exclusive to that kid. Sure, no problem, because you're foregoing the opportunity to work with multiple people.
Of course, yeah.
But it's like rinse, repeat. Right. Every single day, and that's the crazy thing about it, because he's able to do that because it's based on a lot of those parents not knowing what a proper coach is supposed to do or proper training is supposed to look like. Absolutely. So you will get away with it for a certain amount of time until they come to their senses, and then they leave. And I'll just get the next, I hate to use that term, sucker, but essentially that's what it is. Yeah. You know?
That's a really great and nice way to put it, because you have such a big reputation. You need to choose the right words. I don't. On the other hand, I'm a golfer, tennis coach now. I love tennis, so I can just say whatever I want. But that's exactly my point. Like, when I found out about this, it's like, it almost feels like what people do with really expensive brands. You know, at some point, it's a name that you're buying, right? It's a brand. And again, not to take anything away from Rick Macci. Obviously, he's one of the best coaches out there. He was like just incredible resume. But I feel like when you get to a point where you're charging $100 an hour, as you said, for just feeding balls, you're buying the name Rick Macci, right? It's almost like, I took a lesson with Rick Macci, and you pay for that for the name.
And the question people should be asking is, what's that name worth? Right. You know, that's the thing. It's like, I can go out there. I have a resume that's just as thick. You know, I can tell you all the many people that I work with. But, you know, at the end of the day, what are you doing today? Right. What are you doing now? Right. So I could keep living off the fact that, okay, I coach Madison Keys and I coach Naomi Osaka. And I can go out there and Jenny Brady and all of them. I can go out there and milk all of this stuff for what it's worth. But your resume is only supposed to give people an idea about what kind of pathway you've been on.
Right.
And that term excellence really is just something people play around with nowadays. So if you're paying somebody 800, I mean, when you think about it, he hasn't developed one player since the 90s.
Yeah.
Think about that, since 1990.
Right.
So, but he keeps saying all of this stuff, but just go sit there for 30 minutes and see what the body of work looks like.
Right.
What is that name worth today?
Right. Yeah.
And more often than not, you realize it's not worth what it is.
Right.
Not because he cannot do better. I just don't think he wants to.
Right. Yeah.
Why would I put in extra work when I can talk about King Richard all day, and people will just come in here and they'll pay me to literally feed balls for 20 minutes,
Right.
talk for 20, and pick up balls for 10.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
of
a
course.
smart
There's
hustle.
nothing wrong with it because it's like
There's
if
nothing
people
wrong
are
with
gonna pay for it, like
But
go ahead.
it's a smart hustle.
Exactly. It's a smart
so-
hustle, but you gotta, absolutely agree. And
Right.
I'm gonna rewind real quick just to the fact that you just said. That's how humble he is. Like he coaches Naomi Osaka and Madison Kids, which is insane to me. And this just proves your point. Like you're such like this is real success, right? That somebody that has had like you've had the results, and as you said,
Right.
you can really milk that and be talking about it and wear it as a badge. Like, oh yeah, I coached one of the best, like number one player in the world, and but then you see your work ethic and how humble you are, and your focus on the now and what you're doing now in your academy,
Right.
and then I don't know. I feel like it really shows someone that's actually in love with what they're doing. Not in what they did, and then, as you said, trying to get the most out of that.
Right.
But going back to Rick Macy, what you mentioned about like I don't know what people expect, right? Like what, like I feel like they like how much unless you're like a billionaire, how many lessons a week can you pay for 800? Like you know what I mean? How many can you actually pay for? So like I don't know if people like expect. Like maybe it's parents that don't know a lot about tennis and they expect like, oh no, this guy's gonna like do it. If he charges 100, he must.
So
right?
I have this crazy thing that I have this crazy rule. Unfortunately, tennis is a very expensive sport,
Right.
and not everybody can afford to pay what most really good coaches nowadays are charging for a private lesson. But one of the ways to work around that, to negate that, was when I started the academy. I decided that, okay, look, it's very easy to put 4 kids on the court and you make more money for that. And I got together with the coaching staff and I said, look, we're not going to do that.
Right.
I have 3 investors that I work with, and I told them, I said, look, for this to work, you have to give me the keys to the whole place. Meaning, I do things the way
you want to, right.
And one of the things we wanted to do was like, look, we're gonna make the program already good enough that if you want to do a private lesson with a coach, that's the extra. Because you have a situation where, like, I've had to say no to a lot of kids.
Right.
Not because I don't want to make money. I'm a business in my own right, but if a kid who comes from a wealthy background wants to book me 5 days a week, okay, that's 5 physical days I have to be on the court, which means at some point I will have less time for the kids who maybe can only afford to do 1 lesson,
right? Because
now I'm fully booked. So imagine if I did 2 lessons a day, 3 lessons a day with 3 different kids who came from well-off families. Where would I find the time to do 1 with a kid who can only afford to do maybe 1 lesson?
Right.
So we have 2 kids on the court. That way everyone gets the attention that is required to develop. And I do 2, maybe 3 lessons a week.
Right.
So that way everyone gets their fair share of not just the attention and focus, but also the quality that's behind that.
Right.
Now, it's not to say if you have time to do extra, hell, you do extra. But, the notion that, doing private lessons and spending your money is the only way that you can actually become an elite player, it's not really true.
Right.
My thing is this. Before I'll rather do a lesson for free than charge less for it. Do you understand?
Okay.
Because doing a lesson for free is sort of your way of giving back.
Giving back to, right.
Giving back to, and it's something that I encourage a lot of people to do, not just because of self-rewarding, because if it's someone who appreciates your time, it means the world to them. And you'll see that right away. It'll transcend into something greater, So if a kid can afford to pay a lesson, I'll do it for free.
Right.
Before I do it for less money, because part of what every coach aspires to is to level up over the years, depending on which pathway your career takes you. I remember when I was working at Everet Academy, I started there part-time. I was making $10 an hour, and I would work for 3 months just to go and try to play one futures tournament. That was all I could afford. And by the time you go to that one, you come back, you're almost broke, So there's people who go through that even till today,
right?
So just, you could be out there and say, okay, yeah, look, I've made crazy money, but that doesn't mean anything, because what have you done impact-wise to sort of help these kids out who don't necessarily have the ability and the means? And that's why it's really important. You could charge, Patrick Mutogo came here and was charging $5,000 an hour for a private lesson last summer, which is insane to me. But he sees himself as having reached that status level, and he does give back because he has his foundation. So if someone wants to pay him $5,000 for an hour lesson, that's good. But he also has his foundation, which is how Coco came up, and some of the other players, where Patrick must have spent, I don't know, almost like $1 million on Coco. Yeah. Out of his own pocket through his foundation. Right. So, that's that. But, not to go back to him, you have a guy who's charging $800 an hour, only to tell you about King Richard. Like, what is that doing for?
Yeah, not doing anything for the game, anything for the
kid who's idolizing you and would just love to take one lesson or two lessons. Like, what are you doing to, and it becomes more about your ego, than actually helping the players. And let's not get it twisted. If you're a coach and you're coaching this game, it is really not about you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with you. It's about the player. And, who you coached 10 years ago or last week or whatever, it's all fine and good. But, unfortunately, a lot of people get stuck in that, and then they forget, nowadays there's a lot of coaches who want to be just as famous as the player.
Yeah.
But that's not what the game is about.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic, Terhemba. And I think it's also kind of, it's a little bit of common sense, like somebody that has built like you said, a status of so high. I feel like you at some point lose the fire of actually wanting to get people better, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're kind of collecting paychecks at some point. And I was talking about this, like, I don't know if you met Emma's coach, Sergio, but
no, I don't think I have, but I've heard of him before.
Great guy. He's really built everything from scratch, and he's from Spain. His English is still like so it's better. It's a lot better now. But he came speaking like zero English, English, and still today you can see how he struggles to say words, especially like tennis, like tennis terms. But he's such a good coach. Like, it's so hard to explain. Like, you have to see it on the court, but he just looks so, like, his energy. Right. He's a good coach with the energy. He doesn't need too much words, right? He just knows what he's doing, and he has that fire. Like, he wants it for you, like a player. Exactly. As you said, he's not building his ego or a status that he doesn't. Like, you're a perfect example, right? You have such a successful program at Story. Again, I'm Coach Naomi Osaka and Madison. I'm gonna, everything that you don't brag, I'm gonna brag it for you. So like, this seems crazy to me. But you, as you said, you're doing it for the game, right? There's a bigger purpose always, and you're giving back because you found a passion in that, in getting people, and the pleasure comes from seeing a player succeed and feel happy and look good on the court, like look successful and reach their goals, other than like, oh, let's see, now I can charge $700. Now I can charge, right?
Yeah. No, I got lucky in the sense that, one of the things that I decided when I realized that, okay, I wasn't going to play professionally, I was just going to get into coaching, was I became obsessed with information. And generally, I'm just wired like that. I like to know things. And I was surrounded by a lot of great coaches during my time at Everett. Like I said, Andy Brandy, he took me in. He was my mentor. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from John Evert too. I was surrounded by a lot of these guys who'd been in the industry for years, and I would just sponge off of him. And even back then, I'm still. There's a lot of players that I'm still sort of helping out. That I met from back then. Like, it's weird. Like, people will see me at a tournament with a player, like, oh, how do you know Themba? It was like, oh, I met him first when I was like 12. And they'll look at me like, well, how old are you? Like, 'cause she's 30 now. I'm like, yeah. And it's just success of any kind, whether it's in tennis, business-wise or whatever, for me, you get to that level of success just so that you can find one person just to help out.
Right.
If you're fortunate enough to be comfortable in financially and personally to help more than one person,
right,
man, it's even better, because at the end of the day, you will leave the game at some point, and it's not about the goal. Even I tell parents all the time, look, I'm not a miracle worker. We're not miracle workers here. The goal is, whenever you leave here, for whatever reasons you leave here, we want you to leave here better than you came in.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, one day as a coach, you will retire from the sport.
Right.
You can sit at home and people will call you and you can give advice and all of that, but you will leave the sport.
Right.
So how are you leaving it?
Right.
Who are you leaving it with? And did you give this person enough information? Did you make enough of a significance in their life where now they're trying to even do better than what you did? Oh, then the future of the game is going to be in great hands. But if we all went about things the way some people go about things, like, no, me, my money, then honestly, I can't even tell you what that scenario is going to look like in the future, but it'll be scary, So I think there's a certain degree of, you can be humble, but you can also be super driven.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that drives me and my team, every single day when we go out there and we do what we do.
Right. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And it just sounds like maturity as a coach, right? At some point you realize that it's such a demanding job, right?
Yeah.
I think the quality that you're talking about as well, like on the court, going back to how many kids you have on the court and how many lessons you give a day. I spoke to some of my friends that are also coaches, and I feel like at some point, and it's also maturing, because at the beginning you want to earn fast, right? You see, like, it's an expensive sport, you get paid well. If you can be there 11 hours during the good season, right? And a day, and you can earn so well that it's really addictive, and you're kind of like, no, more, and I can more, Yeah. But at some point, either life, an injury, or something is going to slow you down, right?
Yeah.
So something's going to humble you. So I think, and I do realize, and I say with all the honesty in the world, I feel like at some point, in a certain amount of lessons a day, you're not given the same quality of service, right? Like, after 5-6 hours, you're not, the first lesson is not going to be the 10th, right?
Right. See, I mean, physically, I'm a beast. Like, I know that about myself, because over the years, I've taken care of myself physically. A lot of people know me as a very avid cyclist. I ride my road bike on the weekend, sometimes during the week, 50, 60 miles, because I don't want to be a hypocrite when I go on the court. I'm 44 years old now. If I can go on the court and practice with, whether it's WTA, ATP players in the 21s, 19, and you're physically dying on the court and I'm fine, so they can't possibly start telling me what's possible. Oh, it's too hot to practice outside. Really? So why am I not on the floor? So there's a certain degree of just understanding what the job entails. And, like you said, look, sometimes, financially the goal is to build fast.
Right.
But, it's taking me 23 years to get to this point.
Yeah.
To finally say that, okay, I have a business, I run a tennis academy that's one of the fastest growing, one of the more popular and notable tennis academies in the world. But there's people who want to do that in 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
I mean, hats off to you if you can pull it off, but there's so much that goes into that, because, anywhere you go, like I have a good relationship with a lot of the other academy close to us, Everet, and some of the smaller training, to the point where these guys need practice matches. They send their players here. Yeah, we accommodate them. Because why not? Because again, like I said, at the end of the day, it's not about me or us. It's about the players.
Correct.
You know, so I think if people make their short-term and long-term goals solid enough, you know, there's longevity in this sport that you don't have to do 20 lessons in one day and kill yourself now.
Right.
Because it's the quickest way to run yourself out of this business.
Absolutely.
And it will happen. Physically, I guarantee you, it will happen. You end up hating tennis and you'll be that guy trying to charge $800 in park, feeding a basket full of balls to a bunch of 8 years old and just standing in one corner. So, you know, hopefully for everyone who's listening, you don't end up that route.
That's great stuff. I mean, what a wonderful podcast. We're getting ready to wrap it up, but it was great. Again, I missed half of the questions, but I'd rather have this like a true conversation, and it's fantastic. And it's, I don't know, man. It's like you're one of those guys that, you know, you talk about, and I feel like if I keep talking, more amazing accomplishments are gonna put. You're gonna be like, oh yeah, no, like I coached Donald Trump yesterday. It's like, you're so humble, man, and you're so such a successful, and you really deserve everything you've done. And I can see great things coming for you. As humble as you are, I think even if you do things always for others, you can see the success coming your way always, and for every single player under your wing. So all the best, and thank you so much for making the drive, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys when Emma is off COVID and she feels better, and we'll have another guest. Thank you so much.
Get well soon, Emma.
Today's episode is sponsored by MatchSet. MatchSet is an amazing company that provides players with incredible equipment and apparel. With MatchSet, equipment does matter, and they make sure it won't slow you down.
Use code Tennis with Emma to get 10% of Match Tennis today.
Thank you so much for supporting and listening to our podcast. Make sure to follow us on social media.
And be sure to listen to next week's episode of the EMAzing Tennis Podcast.